Okay, and we are live. So, and I apologize if anybody's hearing feedback, but Erica, the other day, you and I were having a conversation, and I thought, let me force her to get on live without any notice or preparation.
Thanks.
Yeah. But you're a pro. You're a pro. So Erica is with Five Ring Financial, and you want to introduce yourself to the audience and just let us know a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a regional vice president with Five Rings Financial, and my primary goal is to teach people about money and then actually help them implement the strategies that they learn. So love helping people.
And Erica is my financial planner who has allowed me to find a way to buy makeup, which has turned, by the way, into, during the pandemic, hair care while making financially sound decisions, and has saved me thousands of dollars. So I don't think, the thing that I like about you as a financial planner is you're not necessarily one that's like, cut everything, but like, okay, these are the mistakes that you commonly make, so how do we insulate them? So I titled this, without your consent or even approval, how to go to college without going broke. Because right now we have a lot of students who are, I guess for me, it's time to start making decisions. We're close to May 1st, which is a decision time. And a lot of people are using their heart and US News and World Report rankings and what they feel. And you have taught me that that's not the way to make financial decisions. So can you explain to everybody, especially people who are considering undergrad, but also graduate school in the future, how do you make financially sound decisions when college costs $15, $20, $30, $40, $50, I've seen $70,000 per year?
Right. Well, first of all, I teach all of the people that I work with to make financial decisions logically. Use math and not emotion when you're making financial decisions of any kind. But that's tough because we are human beings and we're emotional creatures. And when it comes to our money, we are super emotional. So saying it and doing it are, saying it is one thing, doing it is a lot more difficult. And so one of the strategies that I teach people when they're making decisions about money is to use someone who is not emotional about your money as a sounding board. Because even for myself, although I understand these principles and I know them, when it comes to making decisions about my own money, I'm super emotional. And so I have someone that I go to for help in that area. So when it comes to college, yes, it's expensive. And what I teach my clients is, let's talk about or think about what your objective is with going to college and getting this degree. And for most people, it's to give themselves a leg up, to give you an opportunity to have a career, advance in your career, make more money over your lifetime, all of those things. So when it comes to making choices about college, we got to look at the costs and the benefits. So really any financial decision, cost benefit. And so when you're evaluating what your options are, you have to consider not just the name of the school and the reputation and all of that, the program, that's all important. But what's also very, very important is how you're going to pay for it and how much of that you are going to be left to pay after you've graduated. Yeah.
And I think you also have to consider hidden costs, right? So for me, when I went to law school, like I had paid a very small when I went to Virginia Tech. We're both Virginia Tech graduates. I paid very little for that experience because I could at the time. You could not necessarily do that right now.
Right.
And then I didn't realize when I went to law school that I was going to have to take out a loan so I wouldn't be working. And even then I still worked, right? So I took out $20,000 in addition to the $25,000 that I had to pay UVA. Luckily I had merit aid, but I thought I had saved money with this merit aid package. And then I essentially had to pay the same amount of money for my expenses. And I think a lot of people are calculating in the future. Then you had my bar costs, which were $15,000 so that I could stop what I was doing and study for the bar and actually pass it. And then I had my bar fees, my, state bar fees, all the fees associated, bar, the prep program that I had to pay for, the tutor, things like that. I don't think people actually even think, like, even when you're thinking, okay, 4 years from now, I'm going to be going to grad school, you're looking at the sticker price. You're not even thinking, as a resident, I will have to take on this cost, things like that. So how do you make long-term decisions? Is that where you get involved with somebody who knows the ins and out, or?
Yeah, I think someone like you, Jen, who really does know the ins and outs of the costs, the total package, total cost, right? Because that's what you really need to consider. And then also on the end, your end game is, what is that going to net you in the end? I'll give you an example. And this is a real example with one of my clients. She went to vet school and she came out with $300,000 worth of student debt. Yes. You're right.
I don't know why to hit me.
Embraced you for that. Yes, $300,000 worth of student debt, and her starting salary was $70,000. And I'm thinking, who sold you on that plan, right? So when you think about the amount of debt she strapped with, now she could have gone to vet school for a whole lot less. It was the choices that she made about where she would attend and all of that drove that cost up. She could have done that probably for, I'd say, about $100,000, all things considered, her aid and all of that. So think about that $200,000 difference in where she ended up. And the choices in school probably netted her about a $10,000 increase in her starting salary. Mm-hmm. So when you weigh a $10,000 increase, even if you threw every penny of that $10,000 at the $200,000 debt that she's in, the additional $200,000 debt, you don't come even probably in your lifetime. And so it's those kinds of decisions. And after looking at it, and we, as Cindy, nothing she could do about the choices she made. But what she said was, I really wish someone had explained it to me that way before I made those decisions. Because it's taking a toll on her long-term, her ability to grow her assets, her money for her long-term needs.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody yesterday and they're like, Americans can be financially ignorant, but also, I said, these colleges do sell you on the idea this college education is going to put you in a position that nothing else. And I remember my mother told me to go talk to somebody who would go to Harvard Med. And I was like, what's your biggest piece of advice? And he's like, do not pay a lot for undergrad. Just do not pay a lot for undergrad, because your graduate school, you're telling me that you want to go to law school. You don't even know if you're going to end up at law school. Let's just be honest. But your graduate school is going to define you. And I didn't know what that meant at the time. But for me, paying for UVA, if I was actually going to be a lawyer, which I didn't end up doing, which a lot of people don't, meant that I didn't have to go out to find job opportunities. We had people come to our campus. The average yield was $150,000 per year. Over the summer, you could make $2,000 to $3,000 per year. You wouldn't have those opportunities at certain other law schools. So it made sense to be investing in that opportunity in a very different way than I was investing in undergrad. So it made sense for me to stop working, to make sure that I was in a better position academically so that I could get better job opportunities. So it's hard, though, to think long term when you have really good, the one thing I've been hearing a lot is I've worked hard. Mm-hmm. I don't want to just go to we have great state schools.
We do. We're fortunate in Virginia.
Yeah. So I hear a lot, I worked hard. I didn't work to go to this school that's offering me a lot of money. What do you say to that? I point people back to the numbers, because what you just described is an emotional response, right? I point people back to the numbers. Let's really look at the long-term benefit and the long-term cost. Let's face it, going in as a freshman, how many freshmen stick with their original plan all the way through?
very, very few, right?
Mhm.
Many go in not having a plan. They know they want to get a degree, but they don't really know exactly what they intend to do with their life. And those that think they do often change. So I would 100% agree with don't pay a lot for undergrad. Get through that. And I guess it would really take a student who's willing to recognize that they don't know everything at that stage in life and to trust the experience of those who have either done it right or done it wrong. You can learn from both. And I would agree. I know when we both were at Virginia Tech, the cost was a lot less than it is today.
Lot
That was one of
less.
my primary deciding
I choked on water when I heard what Virginia Tech is. Yeah, no, it was my deciding factor.
Listen, I had parents who really didn't give me the choice of the entire country.
Right.
My parents,
My parents told me you were not going to UCLA. Even if they give you a scholarship, the cost to move you to UCLA is going to be way too much.
Yes, and to fly you back and forth for holidays and things like that.
So you're on your own. And sometimes you're like, okay. Like I had a friend that was like, they said, if you go to Howard, you're on your own. And she's like, that's worth it for me for Howard, right? Because she felt like there were opportunities at Howard, but she could articulate what they are. It's not something intangible. So I like the advice that you gave of like sitting down with a financial planner, especially because I don't think kids have a conception of how much like a difference is $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000. Like 20 and 50 seem the same to them, right? Like I'll be making $100,000. Well, when you're making $100,000 and you're paying $5,000 in mortgage, can you even take out a mortgage if you have this much debt? Like, are you going to have the space to make decisions? And for me, one of the biggest decisions was, are my parents going to be able to maybe financially support me? Like at that point, I was pretty financially independent. When I looked at Virginia Tech, it was like $3,700 a year. I could say, I'm working at IHOP. I could make that right now. So my parents had more wiggle room later to like buy me a car or, help me with my books when I needed it. Because the loan, once they were starting to pay back the loan, it was very easy for them to pay back. But for me on undergrad, they told me in advance, you are on your own for grad. So whatever you want to do, that's fine. You're taking on that debt. And knowing that my parents were financially secure enough that they could maybe help me if I was in an emergency. And I graduated during the recession, so an emergency did come up. That was significant for me. The other thing that I'm seeing a lot is, you can negotiate your financial aid, but recognizing that your financial aid after you get in and they've caught you on the enrollment.
Right.
I mean, so how do you reconcile that? So like say a student is able to negotiate or able to get a scholarship, but then the scholarship requirements change. Are you recommending that people look at the sticker price and say this is a comfortable price even if everything changes, or how do you make that decision?
Well, I don't think you can just look at the sticker price. I think you have to evaluate the whole package. We can't do this in just a linear fashion. It's a collective thing. And I honestly think having the expertise of someone like you, Jen, and someone like me that can look at help you look at all aspects of it will serve you well. Also, listening to mom and dad, and I know that's probably not a popular thing when you're 18, but they do have a concept of the difference between 20,000 and 50,000, even if they're not financial planners, right? They understand that. And they also understand either through their good decisions or bad decisions, what impact that will have on you long-term, if we're talking to our students. But I also think it's important to talk to mom and dad about that.
And also, going to Virginia and being in Virginia is very different than going to school in New York, right? Or going to school in LA or going to school in San Francisco. So what is the cost of living? Like looking at apartment complexes, where do people live second year, third year, fourth year? Like how much is that going to cost? Like starting to make decisions in advance. Like for us, it was, if you're going to live here for 3 years, it's actually cheaper for us to buy a place than for us to rent a place. So let's buy a place and then rent it out afterwards so that we can maybe pay for your grad school. Or let's find a place that's the prices are increasing so that when we sell it, you have a pot that you could tap into for grad school. So I think sometimes you're not looking at the whole picture, right? Like, what is the cost of relocation? What is the cost of the area around the school? What is the cost of the rent? What is the cost of everything? Which doesn't necessarily feel comfortable. And the thing that you were talking about, talking to your parents, saying, if we pay $15,000 and we take out $15,000 in loans, or we pay $25,000, what impact will that have on my day to day? Maybe not this year, not next year, but like 4 years from now when I'm going to grad school, if I'm paying a different loan price, will I be able to get your support then? Or is that going to impact the amount of support that I got? How do you have parents initiate that conversation? Or
I mean, I know for me, it's always part of my onboarding when I have new clients and I know they have children, regardless of what age. The earlier that we start having these conversations, the better. So I like to get parents when they have newborns to be thinking about how they're going to handle college. I know there are some parents, regardless of their economics, their financial standing, that believe that don't believe it's their responsibility to handle college for their kids. And then I have other parents who believe it is 100% their responsibility to handle that. So, no right or wrong, no judgment there, just understand what it is and be having those conversations with your children as early as they're able to understand it. Waiting till their, junior year to start having those conversations, I don't think is a good idea. Kids need to be prepared for how that's going to go for them as early as possible so that everybody understands what the parents intend to do and what part of that they're expecting their kids to do. So having those conversations early, I think, is super important. It's also, when you think about the time value of money, if parents are going to be saving for their kids' education, starting early makes such a huge difference. Even before you have kids, if you're planning to have kids, it's a good time to actually start saving. And I know as a parent myself, one of the deals that I've made with my kids is that, we've set aside money for your education, and that's it. This is what we have for you. And the second thing is, if you don't spend it, it's still yours, not to do anything you want with, but to give you a good start in life. So it could be the down payment on the house or the seed money to start your business, whatever that is. But it also, I think, gives that student some incentive to actually make smart decisions about where they're choosing to go to school and consider the whole package, because what's left is for your use.
What if you're a student, what if you just okay, we didn't do this. We're now making the decision. We were not financially responsible. We wish we had watched this earlier, blah, blah, blah. Now it's time to make decisions. Circumstances have changed during the pandemic. I know that as well. I always tell people, if your financial circumstance has changed since your last taxes, then you need to be doing financial appeals to every school, but also know that it could not work out the next year. Unless they say this is guaranteed for 4 years.
Right.
But parents who are too late, right, and now have to do damage control, what do you recommend for them?
Well, it's challenging, right? I mean, obviously there's going to be loans involved and all that kind of stuff, and to limit definitely to limit that. But what I definitely don't recommend is that they pull from their own retirement to pay for college. And I see parents do that all the time. You know how when you get on a plane and they say, put your own mask on first before assisting others? And I know that might seem selfish to some parents, but it's the same. The analogy works when it comes to things like college for your kids. If you've got a 2-year-old sitting beside you in that plane seat, and you don't get your mask on, you're both not going to make it, right? Mm-hmm. Because that 2-year-old cannot help you. It's the same when you're talking about educating your kids. Your putting them in college so that they get a good start in their career life, right? But if you sacrifice your own long-term, retirement money and things like that, hey, maybe that kid will do well when they get out and they will come back and help you. And maybe they'll do well and they'll choose not to help you. Or maybe they won't do well and you both go down, right?
Right.
So you, as a parent, I think the best thing you can do for yourself and for your student is to be financially sound yourself first before assisting your child with their school.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's not popular amongst many parents. It's not a popular thought, but the best thing you can do is to be financially self-sufficient yourself, right? Because I think the last thing any parent wants is to be dependent on their child in their old age. And if you put out all of their needs and wants, because many times it's not needs, it's wants, before yours, then that's the position you're going to put them on in a time when they're probably raising their own families and dealing with their own financial needs, that now you pile on yours because you did not make sound decisions about that when they were in school.
Are there circumstances where you would pay more for an undergraduate institution? So, and let's actually say, I know this is going to be antithesis to who you are, but what circumstances would make you think it's probably a financially sound decision for us to pay a little bit more?
Well, the way you phrase that, a financially sound decision, never.
So there's not a circumstance. So what if going to a particular institution means that you're going to graduate and the average pay for one institution is significantly higher than another institution, or the med school acceptance rate is higher, or that law school acceptance rate is higher, and you anticipate those things? Would not financially sound, but in the context of those things, if somebody's deciding, what would you advise?
I would apply to the one that's less expensive and the one that's more expensive that has a higher acceptance rate. And if I get accepted into the one that is going to allow me in and my total cost is going to be less, great. But then you do the math. Now, if chances are I'm going to be making $50,000 a year more coming out of college, coming out of med school, then we do the math and we figure out, like, what's the time frame that I recoup that? Because you've got to factor in not just how much you're making, but you've got to factor in, how much you're going to be paying in those student loans. So you got to weigh both of those, and then you do the math and you figure out where you come out better. I mean, there's no one formula. There's no you sit down and you do the math, you do the evaluation, and then you're making an informed decision, not one based on what you feel or what you think.
And that, I think the math and the timeline matters a lot, because as you know, your loans 10 years from now will look very different than when you graduate, because that interest rate, like, I think the other day I called you and I was like, I'm going to pay, I thought I was making the soundest financial. I was like, I'm going to pay off my car insurance and that's going to lower my monthly cost. And you're like, that doesn't have interest.
Why would you do that?
You were like, that doesn't have interest. You know what does have interest? That tax payment that you have. That has interest. Pay the thing with interest first. So, if it's going to take you 15 years to pay one thing off and 10 years to pay another thing off, and the interest in that 5 years is going to grow so substantially that it's actually going to take you 20 years, and you're not calculating that 25 years, 30 years. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm banking on loan forgiveness. And in my class in particular, as a law student, I'm banking on loan forgiveness. And then in 2009, all the jobs dried up. Sometimes what I do is, in the worst case scenario, I don't go to law school. Would it still be financially sound to attend this university? I do go to law school. Would it still be financially sound? So, like, I guess I'm going to ask you a question that I probably know the answer to. The devil's in the details.
Absolutely. You just answered your own question. You got to look at the whole picture. You cannot pull one aspect of that apart and make a sound decision. You have to look at all aspects of it. And, I'm more inclined to look at the hard numbers because that's who I am. Don't get me wrong. There are some soft things that as a parent, I would consider. Safety. That would be a big one. Or is my child going to an area where I'm going to feel comfortable? They're going to feel comfortable that they're going to be safe. All of those things do factor in. But the first thing that I look at is cost benefit, and I look at the numbers, and we also have to look at everything else. So,
and then have somebody else look at the numbers. And talk to your accountant, like what's the impact? And talk to your financial planner, what's your impact? And talk to the person managing your retirement, what's the impact? So what last piece of advice would you give parents who are sitting maybe with offers and don't know how to evaluate?
Yeah.
What is the best choice? Because a lot of times kids fall in love with a particular school at a particular name. In my house, it was just get over it.
Yeah, mine too.
Like,
mine too.
You're not going there, right? But I will say there are situations where I have seen parents force children to go to an institution that they don't end up graduating from because they really didn't like it. It wasn't a good fit. What is the last piece of advice that you would give parents trying to figure out which school is going to be, especially when it's like there's this school that's ranked so much higher than this school, or this school that has this program that this school doesn't? How do you what's your last piece of advice?
I would say be honest about what things are most important, right? And make a list of the things that are most important. And then look at each one of those schools against the things that you've decided are most important. And then you can narrow that list down to 2 or 3 that actually meet all of your requirements, or most of them, right? Then you can also, on top of that, look at those costs. And I think that'll make it a little bit easier to evaluate the whole picture. What are the things that are most important to me? Evaluate the schools based on that. And then also, of course, that financial piece that is going to be important to you, not just now, but I just caution the students to really think about how these choices are going to impact them, honestly, for the rest of their lives.
Or their family. And
yes,
because I think sometimes you're not absorbing the cost, so it doesn't matter to you. But asking your parents, what are the implications of this choice, right? Am I not going to be able to get a car? Am I not going to be able to have, I'm going to have to cover expenses? I
come
think
home for Thanksgiving, whatever is important. Am I not going to be able to do those things because we made this choice?
Right. And a couple of years ago, I had a student who was like, the difference was about I don't know, $8,000. But that person said, okay, how much is $8,000 per month in loans? Okay. The program that I have would involve a community of, the person was from a different country of origin. I would be able to be embedded in a community of country of origin, which means I could particularly live with a family, country of origin, which means that I would be safer as I'm a marginalized minority student. And that was I think the $7,000 in loans, or $8,000 at the time, was I'm paying maybe $700 to $1,000 a month in the future for that benefit. And they were able to work back and say, that's worth it to me because of my personal safety concerns.
Sure. And that's the kind of evaluation that I'm talking about, that every student and, every family should be doing. I think about where I am at this stage in life, and I think about the choices my parents made and how thankful I am that they did not sacrifice their personal financial situation to I guess to bow to my whims and desires when I was a very young and naive 18-year-old making those decisions. Because today they're in a financial position where they're completely able to take care of themselves. Whereas
Mm.
I look at some of my friends and how they're dealing with their parents, they're having to provide financial subsidies to their parents at this point.
Mhm.
Yeah, they went to their dream school, but now at the stage in their life where they should be totally focused on their own long-term goals and, financially, they're having to split that between supplementing their parents and still raising their own families.
I lied. I have one more question. If you have time, but I
I
lied.
do.
I had one more question because a lot of parents are like, I came to this country or I made these sacrifices, right? So, and I know you're about to be like, that's emotional language, but I made these sacrifices. What was this all for if I can't get my kid the best school or my kid worked hard and now I'm going to deprive them of a particular school? How do you deal with that emotional aspect and say, the sacrifices will be worth it, right? That's what I hear that a lot. The sacrifices will be worth it because they're going to have a position that nobody in our family has ever had. Like they're going to have this name brand school that nobody's ever gone to. It's going to open up doors in the future.
And it might, or it might not. So and here's the thing, Jen, as a person who's advising them, you can only advise. And I've had to learn that in my own practice is that I will give the best advice that I possibly can, given the information that I have. And ultimately, they are going to make the decision that they're going to make, despite the advice you may give, the advice, either of us may give. They're going to make that decision. And guess who has to live with it? They do. And so you really can't combat somebody who is completely making an emotional decision, because there is nothing that you can come back with that will combat a completely emotionally made decision. So, you can give them all the numbers, you can give them all the scenarios, all the reasons why they should consider something different. And ultimately, they're going to decide what they're going to decide. And you just have to be okay with that.
And then in terms of the sacrifice narrative, do you say a parent's like, I hear what you're saying and I'm starting to change my mindset. How do I deal with the idea that I did make these sacrifices, but essentially it's not going to work out?
Well,
it does work out, though, I guess.
It does. It actually does work out, because if that is honestly what's most important to them, then perhaps they are willing to sacrifice the money to have that emotional thing.
Yeah, it might be worth the cost.
So happiness and peace of mind, they say all the time, you can't put a value on that. I mean, I actually but that's just me, and I think I'm rare in that respect.
Well, you told me the value of my makeup was 1%. Like, put that 1% away.
Well, that's a perfect example, Jen. Yeah. When you and I first met and we were talking about budgets, you were so resistant. And I was like, look, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to make sure that you consider the impact of the decision that you make. But ultimately, it's your decision. Now, would I have a line item in my budget? Clearly not for makeup, right?
Right. But does my eyeshadow look great today?
It looks fabulous. I noticed it. I absolutely did. And what I also love about that is that you decided what the big rocks were, what were the most important things, and you made sure that those were handled. Makeup was one of them for you.
And
for some
giving
people,
away money, and making sure I had enough financial protection, like even making decisions like I love to tutor for free, and that desire is not going to go away. Doing it an hour before my technical paid day starts allows me to have both, right? Like I might be waking up an hour. Like, do you love it enough to wake up an hour? Is a question that I had to confront. And I was like, I do actually love it enough that I'd be willing to wake up at 9. And for me, that's a big thing.
That's early for you.
9 instead of 8, so that I could still meet that goal of providing. So I think, I will end with this story. I did not get into UVA. I got waitlisted at UVA. I went to Virginia Tech and I was like, this is actually the place that I need to go. So I never thought about UVA again. And then 4 years later, I ended up at UVA Law. And my friend who transferred in later was like, you are so lucky you did not go to UVA. Because if you had gone to UVA undergrad, as somebody who had gone to UVA undergrad, she's like, it was impossible for me to get the grades that I needed, to get the research that I needed. And it's more competitive for UVA people because everybody wants to stay in Charlottesville. It's more competitive for a UVA grad because they don't want overrepresentation. So they have so many people applying for so little slots. But Virginia Tech, yeah, there's a lot of people applying from Virginia Tech to UVA. But it was easier for me to get opportunities to stand out. And I think sometimes we want to go to the most competitive school, but it's like, are you going to be able to get the things that you need on your resume as a grad to stand out? And also, are you considering that it might be harder for you at this level because so many people are going to be applying at this level when it might be easier for you at a little bit lower? And are you considering that the school that you say values you might not be giving you a financial plan package that proves that they value you?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you really think about it, your first job when you graduate is where you went to school does matter to some extent, but it matters most in that first job.
Yeah.
When you're first applying out of college, right? And then beyond that, they're looking at other factors, weighing other factors as well. So,
I know for law in particular, it does, like even now, 10 years from now, it still does make a difference. And that's why I was willing to pay for law school, but nobody has asked
not
me.
Undergrad.
No, I mean, and Virginia Tech has a very big network. No, but it might get you in the door, but it doesn't close the same way a law school does. So having that financial space to make better financial, because if you don't, I just want to say this, if you don't like the prices of undergrad, woo, when you start looking at law schools and grad schools and masters and PhDs, you're going to hate grad. If you feel financially strapped now, I mean, Erica, if you feel financially strapped now,
yeah, wait for life.
And wait for graduate school, because you do not want to tell your kids no now might mean in the future being like, and because we told you no 4 years ago, now we can start talking about the big price, which is graduate school. Yeah. Well, I appreciate
great
you
advice.
I'm going to end the broadcast. We'll still be here for a second, but I appreciate you coming on and telling everybody the advice. I will be sending this to as many people as possible. Where can people follow up with you, and what opportunities do you have to connect with parents or anybody? And one particular question: if people have messed up and they're like, okay, yeah, she's going next year and I haven't saved anything, and
right,
can they still reach out, or are you like, you're done?
Absolutely. I believe in meeting people where they are financially. And I know there are folks who feel like they have done some things wrong, and they really don't want anybody looking under the lid and seeing what's going on. I will tell you that nothing we talk about goes any farther. My objective is to take a look at where you are, take a look at where you're looking to go, and see if I have any ideas that will help you get there better, faster, in a more protected way. And that's really what I do. That's what I love to do. So
and absolutely. I will say, the thing I love about Erica is she doesn't try to push you before you're ready. She's like, when you're ready to show me this, then we can talk. And she's like, but she'll say, I can't make great decisions because you're hiding the ball on that. But sometimes I'm like, I'm just not ready to go there.
And yeah, it's kind of like peeling the onion,
I mean, she told me, you better start your own firm probably for 10 years. Yeah. And then finally, when I did it, she's like, I told you that you could make more money. And now, but I'm not going to shame you for not making that choice earlier. So I think the thing I like about you is that you do balance the emotions, and you're not like, you're never drinking a latte again. Let that dream die.
No, because I still drink a latte every now and then, but I just don't go every day. They're choices, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the, I think the key ways to engage with me is I teach a lot of educational events. One of them is called Money 101, where we focus on fundamentals and principles about money and how money works. And between my colleague, Kimberly Evans, and myself, we teach one of those every single Monday night. So I think it's Kimberly this Monday night. It'll be a great presentation, whether you hear it from her or you hear it from me, but definitely reach out. I'm at 5ringsnationscapital.com. That's my website. So that's a great place to start. And yeah, definitely reach out there. There's a contact me on that. There's a place to schedule an initial consultation. So that's the best place.
And she will not badger you. That is important to say, because
I'm not into badgering.
Planners that I met 10 years ago, and they've been stalking me since. So
yes, I will not force you to join the witness protection program to get away from me. I promise.
Well, Erica, I appreciate having you on. I will probably be talking to you after this, but I appreciate having you on because you allowed me to buy makeup when I was broke.
Hey, it's important to you. And what's important to you, Jen, is important to me. I just help you figure out how to take care of the things that are important to you.
Yep. All right. I think we had, yes. Oh, Beatrice said, my cousin said hi. Hey, Beatrice. So, all right. I'm going to end the broadcast. Thank you guys so much. And if you have any questions, please, I'll put Erica's contact information when I return eventually. Okay.